The kitchen smelled like rosemary and garlic, the kind of comfort that wraps around you after a long day. I moved between the counter and the stove, stirring the sauce, tasting, adjusting. The light outside was soft, slipping into that golden hour that makes everything look gentler than it really is. That's when David's phone started to ring. The screen blinked on the counter, flashing unknown number. I called out, "David, your phone's ringing." But there was no answer. Only the quiet bubbling of the pot. Something about that silence pulled me in. I wiped my hands on a towel, watching the phone vibrate like it had something urgent to confess. Maybe it was nothing, a telemarketer, a wrong number. But something in me hesitated. I reached for it, telling myself I'd just glance at the screen, that it wasn't really snooping if I was only helping. My thumb hovered over the green button, and before I could change my mind, I answered. "Hello," I said softly, my voice almost blending with the sound of the boiling water. What came next didn't belong in my kitchen, not in my world. A woman's voice, warm, playful, intimate, whispered through the line, "Hey, love, I already miss you." For a moment I couldn't breathe. The air in the kitchen turned heavy, pressing down on me like a weight I didn't see coming. That voice. It wasn't just affectionate, it was familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. I didn't speak. I just stood there frozen, the phone against my ear, the scent of garlic and betrayal suddenly inseparable. Then I found my voice. "Who is this?" I asked, steady but cold. The woman went quiet, as if she'd realized the wrong person had picked up. Then the line went dead. A second later, a message appeared on the screen. "Sorry, wrong number." I stared at it, the words almost mocking me. No one says that after calling someone love. I felt a sting of anger rise, not loud, not chaotic, just sharp and controlled, like a blade hidden under silk. My mind started piecing together moments that didn't quite fit. Late-night showers, quick smiles at his phone, sudden business calls. Little things I had chosen not to question. Until now. When David walked in moments later, the sound of his keys and his easy laugh filled the room. "Something smells amazing," he said, kissing the air near my cheek. I smiled faintly, my voice calm. "Yeah, something sure does." He didn't notice the way I was watching him, the way I was listening, and for the first time, I wasn't sure which of us was actually being observed. Dinner went on as if nothing had happened. He talked about his day, meetings, deadlines, the usual noise, while I nodded, pretending to listen. My hands moved automatically, serving the pasta, refilling his glass. But inside, I was somewhere else, replaying that voice over and over. Every word of hers echoed through my mind, soft yet cruelly clear. It's strange how something as simple as a phone call can shift the ground beneath you. When he laughed, I studied him the way you study a stranger you're trying to remember from a dream. His charm had always been his weapon, effortless, disarming. I used to find it endearing. Now it felt rehearsed. I watched him reach for his fork, his smile easy, his tone casual, and all I could think was, who was she? Not just a name, but the kind of woman who would call another woman's husband and whisper, "I miss you." That night, after he fell asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at that phone. Its black screen reflected my face, calm, unreadable, but alive with 1,000 questions. Somewhere between the tick of the clock and the hum of the refrigerator, I made a quiet promise to myself. I wouldn't accuse him, not yet. I'd wait, watch, listen. Because whatever this was, I wasn't about to be blindsided again. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice again. Soft, playful, a melody I never wanted to remember. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, some odd coincidence, but my body knew better. There's a difference between peace and pretending. The sheets felt cold beside me, even with David sleeping just inches away. He turned once, murmuring something I couldn't catch, and I wondered if he dreamed of her. The thought made my heart ache in a way I couldn't explain. Not loud, just hollow. By morning, my mind had settled into something sharper. Doubt had turned into quiet determination. I brewed coffee, the smell filling the kitchen, trying to steady my thoughts with the familiar ritual. When he walked in, hair messy, still half asleep, I forced a smile. "Did you get any strange calls last night?" I asked casually, my tone light enough to sound harmless. He frowned, confused, or pretending to be. "No, why?" "Someone called your phone," I said, watching his face. "Said they missed you." His laugh came quick. Too quick. "Probably a telemarketer," he joked, reaching for his mug. "Telemarketers don't sound like that," I said, my voice steady but deliberate. He brushed it off, kissing my cheek, muttering something about being late for work. But as he reached for his jacket, I noticed it. The slightest tremor in his hands. After he left, the silence in the house felt louder than any argument. I sat at the table, staring at his untouched coffee cup, the faint imprint of his lips on the rim. That tiny mark made me sick. Proof of routine, of something normal, when nothing felt normal anymore. I kept hearing her voice, the way she said love, like it belonged to her. My stomach knotted every time the memory replayed, but anger kept me upright. If I'd learned anything in my life, it was that women like me don't break. We calculate. When I finally stood up, I caught my reflection in the microwave door. My face looked calm, even gentle, but my eyes had changed. There was a steadiness there I hadn't seen before. That's when I made up my mind. I wasn't going to cry or beg or demand answers he'd twist into lies. I was going to know, for certain. And once I did, he'd never see it coming. That evening, when he showered, I moved quietly through the bedroom, his phone right where he'd left it. My hands didn't even shake. I opened the messages. Nothing. Every thread clean, too clean. My chest tightened. He'd deleted them. That was all the confirmation I needed. Guilt doesn't delete itself. I took photos of his call log, the unknown number, the time of the call, just in case. My hands were steady, precise, almost detached. It's strange how quickly fear can turn into clarity when you're betrayed. I wrote the number down on a scrap of paper, folded it twice, and tucked it inside my journal like evidence in a case I hadn't yet decided to prosecute. The shower kept running in the background, the sound of water masking the sound of my heartbeat. When he came out, towel around his waist, humming something off-key, I was already sitting on the edge of the bed, pretending to scroll through my phone. He smiled, the same familiar, disarming smile that once felt like home. "Everything okay?" he asked. I met his eyes, nodded, and smiled back. "Perfect," I said. He leaned down to kiss my forehead, completely unaware that everything had already shifted. That night, I lay awake again, but this time it wasn't torment keeping me up. It was purpose. There's a calm that comes right before a storm, the kind that makes you feel almost powerful. I didn't know who she was yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I was going to find her. And when I did, David would finally understand what silence can do to a person who's done pretending. The next morning, I woke up different. Not softer, not angry, just focused. Every movement felt intentional, like I was walking through the first steps of something I couldn't turn back from. I waited until David left for work before pulling out the number I'd written down. The digits stared back at me, innocent but dangerous. My fingers hovered over the phone as my mind played out every possible scenario. What if she answered? What if she didn't? Either way, I needed to know. I dialed using no caller ID, my pulse steady, almost unnaturally calm. When the line clicked, a woman's voice came through. "Hello?" she said, warm and unsuspecting. I changed my tone instantly, light and professional. Hi, I'm calling from the florist, just confirming the delivery for David. I didn't even finish before she laughed softly. Oh, he's full of surprises, isn't he? Always something romantic. That laugh, the same one I'd heard in my kitchen, curled through the line like poison wrapped in perfume. I hung up. My hand trembled only once before I set the phone down on the counter. My reflection in the oven glass stared back at me, pale, sharp-eyed, unrecognizable. The kind of woman who'd just seen the truth and wasn't about to look away. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the storm in my chest. Whatever she thought she had with him, it wasn't going to end on her terms. Not anymore. I stood there for a long time, staring at the quiet phone, trying to make sense of what just happened. My body felt cold, but my mind was burning. So it was true. Every instinct I'd tried to silence was right all along. David wasn't just careless, he was bold. The kind of man who smiled across a dinner table while living a double life. The kind of man who thought his lies were invisible. I almost laughed at the thought. He really didn't know me as well as he thought. That evening, I called Marianne, my best friend, my mirror when I couldn't see myself clearly. When she picked up, I didn't cry, didn't even raise my voice. I called her, I said. There was a pause, then her whisper. Oh, Laura. What did she say? I told her everything. The laugh, the words, the way it all confirmed what I already knew. Marianne stayed quiet for a moment, then asked the question that hung in the air. What are you going to do? I looked around my kitchen, the same place where this all began, and felt something shift deep inside me. I'm not screaming, I said softly. I'm not crying. I'm going to make sure he knows exactly what it feels like to lose what he took for granted. Marianne didn't respond right away, but when she finally did, her voice carried a quiet awe. Then he won't see it coming. After we hung up, I sat in silence, the hum of the refrigerator filling the room like background noise to my thoughts. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was awake. There's a point where pain stops begging for explanation and starts asking for justice. I wiped the counter clean, one slow stroke at a time, as if I could erase the memory of her voice the same way. But some stains don't come off. They just teach you where not to touch again. That night, when David came home, I studied him differently. Every word he said became evidence, every glance a clue. He poured himself a glass of wine, kissed my temple, and told me he'd had a long day. I smiled, nodded, pretending to believe him. It's strange how easy lying looks when you know what truth feels like. He talked about work, about stress, about dinner plans, all while his phone stayed face down on the counter. Convenient. As I watched him, a strange calm settled over me. I wasn't the woman waiting for confessions anymore. I was the one writing the ending. Whatever game he thought he was playing, he'd already lost it the moment I answered that call. I just hadn't told him yet. In the days that followed, I became someone else. Or maybe I just stopped pretending. I still cooked his meals, still kissed him goodbye, still asked about his day. But inside, I was memorizing everything. His schedule, his habits, the lies tucked neatly between his smiles. It was strange how easy it was to slip into the role of the perfect wife while planning the exact moment I'd stop being one. I didn't need to confront him yet. I needed him comfortable, predictable. At breakfast one morning, I tested my new performance. "You're working late again?" I asked, pouring him coffee, voice light as steam. "Yeah," he said, distracted, scrolling through his phone. "Big project. You know how it is." I smiled, brushing his hand with mine. "Of course. You're the hardest worker I know." He looked up and grinned, and for a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. He had no idea that every word leaving his mouth was helping me build the trap he'd eventually fall into. That weekend, I told him I'd be visiting my sister for a few days. Girls' trip, I said, cheerful, casual. He didn't even blink. You deserve it, he replied, already half focused on something else. I watched him from across the room, his reflection faint in the glass behind him, and thought how easy it was for people to lie when they believed they were safe. Let him think I was gone. Let him believe he was free. He'd never guess who'd be watching. When Friday came, I packed a small bag, just enough to make the lie believable. A change of clothes, a book, a charger. I even texted him a photo from the road, a blurred shot of highway lights that wasn't mine. Made it safely, I wrote. His reply came seconds later. Have fun. Love you. I stared at the screen for a long time, that last word flickering like a dying light. Love. The word had become so cheap between us that it barely meant anything anymore. But soon he'd understand its weight again, just not the way he expected. I stayed in the city, checked into a small hotel near downtown, and waited until Monday. Each night I played the part, short calls, quick messages, cheerful tones. Then, on the third evening, I followed him. His routine was predictable, like clockwork. He left work at 6, loosened his tie by the time he reached the parking lot, and always checked his phone before starting the car. I followed at a distance, headlights off, heart steady. Revenge doesn't rush, it observes. At 7:30, he pulled into a small Italian restaurant, the kind with candles in the windows and soft jazz humming from inside. I parked across the street, watching from the shadows. And there she was. The voice from the phone. Younger, effortless, laughing like the world had never hurt her. I watched him take her hand across the table, watched his smile stretch into something I didn't recognize anymore. It wasn't anger I felt then. It was clarity. Finally, I wasn't guessing. I was witnessing. I stayed in the car, the hum of the engine low, the air thick with the scent of rain about to fall. From where I sat, I could see everything. The way his hand brushed her cheek, the way she leaned in, their laughter spilling into the night like a secret song. 2 glasses of red wine on the table, half empty, intimate. My pulse slowed, not from shock but from something sharper. Satisfaction. Proof. Not whispers or suspicions. Reality. And I caught it all. I lifted my phone, steady hands, clean shots, every smile, every touch, every betrayal preserved in perfect clarity. When they finally stood to leave, he opened the door for her, his hand resting on the small of her back like it belonged there. I waited until they drove off, then sat in silence, letting the quiet wrap around me like armor. My chest didn't ache anymore. It was as if something had been cut loose inside me, something I'd been holding for too long. I wasn't his wife tonight. I was his witness. Back at the hotel, I scrolled through the photos, one by one. Each image told the story he thought he'd buried, and tomorrow I'd make sure he never forgot it. But this wasn't about humiliation. It was about balance. For the first time in months, I slept easily, knowing that justice didn't need rage. It only needed timing. I waited a few days before making my move. Patience had become my sharpest weapon. While he carried on as if everything were normal, the same smiles, the same shallow goodnights, I was setting the stage. I planned a dinner, something he'd never suspect. I invited his family, his closest friends, even his boss, who happened to owe me a favor. It would be a night to celebrate him, I said. You deserve it, I told him with a smile so convincing I almost believed myself. He kissed my hand, grateful, oblivious. That evening, the house glowed with candles and laughter. The table was set with our best china, wine glasses catching the light like little secrets. I moved through the room with grace, every detail rehearsed. He was radiant, the center of attention, charming everyone, as always. Watching him play the role of the perfect husband almost made me laugh. Almost. Because I knew exactly how this scene would end. When everyone had settled, I stood, glass in hand. My heart didn't race. It pulsed steady, strong. "Before dessert," I said, smiling warmly, "I'd like to show everyone something beautiful." I connected my phone to the TV, the screen flickering to life behind me. For a heartbeat, David kept smiling, until the first photo appeared. His laughter, her face, their kiss, and the room fell silent. For a moment, no one breathed. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the soft background music. It all vanished, swallowed by the kind of silence that has a sound of its own. David's smile collapsed, his hand frozen mid-air. "Laura," he stammered, his voice cracking. "What the hell is this?" I tilted my head slightly, studying him like I might study a painting, detached, curious. "You tell me," I said calmly. "I was just about to ask how you enjoyed your romantic dinner." His face turned pale, eyes darting between the photos and the faces staring back at him. He tried to speak, to weave some desperate explanation, but I didn't give him the space. "Don't bother lying again," I said, my tone still gentle but razor-sharp. "I already called her. She's quite talkative when she thinks she's speaking to a florist." Gasps rippled through the room, his boss shifting uncomfortably in his chair, his mother clutching her pearls like she could squeeze the shame out of them. David's lips parted, but no words came. For once, he was speechless. I set my wine glass down with care, the sound of it touching the table louder than any accusation. The power in that silence was intoxicating. Not revenge for revenge's sake, but a reclamation. My truth had been dragged through whispers. Now it stood in the light. And for the first time, I saw him not as my husband, but as the stranger who had mistaken my grace for weakness. I slipped my wedding ring off and placed it gently beside my glass. It made the smallest sound. A quiet punctuation to a story that had gone on too long. "You can keep your secret calls," I said softly. "I'm keeping my dignity. No shouting, no tears. Just the truth, stripped bare." I walked past him, past the stunned faces and half-eaten plates, feeling the weight of every eye in the room but not caring. The air felt lighter as I reached the doorway, like someone had finally opened a window after years of pretending everything was fine. Behind me, he called my name, once, twice, but his voice no longer belonged to me. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I'd spent too long trying to make sense of a man who never deserved the effort. Tonight wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about release. Every step I took felt deliberate, strong, almost peaceful. The door closed behind me, and with it, the last remnants of who I used to be. Out on the porch, the night was cool, quiet, and honest. I could hear faint laughter from the house, awkward and fading, like people desperate to fill the silence I'd left behind. I looked up at the sky, exhaled, and smiled to myself, not out of joy, but out of certainty. He'd remember this night for the rest of his life, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't care if he did. It's been months since that dinner, but sometimes I still catch myself listening for his footsteps, ghosts of routines that no longer belong to me. My mornings are quieter now, but not empty. The air feels different when no one's lying in it. I wake up early, open the curtains, and let the light in. Something I used to forget to do. My kitchen smells like coffee and paint these days. The scent of rosemary and garlic has been replaced by turpentine and canvas, the perfume of new beginnings. I started painting again. At first, it was just to fill the silence, but then it became something else, a kind of language I didn't know I was fluent in. Each brushstroke felt like a word I never got to say, each color a small rebellion. A few weeks ago, a local gallery offered to hang 3 of my pieces. Standing there, surrounded by my own work, I felt something I hadn't in years: pride that didn't depend on anyone else. One afternoon, as I was cleaning my brushes, my phone rang. The sound startled me, not because I feared what I'd hear, but because I realized how long it had been since I dreaded that sound. The screen lit up. Marianne. I smiled before even answering. "Hey, stranger," Marianne said, her voice bright and familiar. "You sound happy." I laughed, not the polite kind I used to fake, but one that came from somewhere real. "I am," I told her. I finally stopped waiting for his calls and started answering my own. There was a pause on her end, a soft sigh that carried more understanding than words ever could. "You sound like yourself again," she said quietly. "No," I replied, looking at the streaks of paint on my hands. "I sound like someone new." After we hung up, I sat by the window, watching the city move, people rushing, laughing, carrying on with their lives. For so long I thought freedom would feel like emptiness, but it didn't. It felt like possibility, like air after a storm. I thought about that night at the dinner table, how silence had become my weapon, how truth had set me free without ever needing to scream. There's something sacred about walking away without dragging the wreckage behind you. I still wear no ring, and I've stopped checking my reflection for signs of who I was. The woman in the mirror now has paint on her arms, light in her eyes, and no reason to explain herself to anyone. The kind of peace I found didn't come from forgetting him. It came from remembering me. Later that evening, I went for a walk downtown, the kind you take with no destination, just your thoughts and the sound of your own steps. Storefronts glowed under the fading light, and when I passed a phone shop window, I stopped. Rows of sleek, new models shimmered under bright displays. I caught my reflection in the glass, steady, smiling, whole. The same device that once shattered my world now stood as a symbol of something else entirely. Control, choice, freedom. I thought back to that night in my kitchen, the sound of a stranger's voice saying words that weren't meant for me. It used to haunt me, but now it felt distant, almost cinematic. The opening scene of a story that led me here. The last call I answered had broken my heart, yes, but it also cracked something open. It made room for me to rebuild. As I walked away, the city hummed softly around me, alive, forgiving, full of second chances. I didn't look back at the phones or at the past they represented. I just smiled to myself and whispered, "The next call I answer will change my life." And this time, I knew it would be my own voice on the other end.